Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into the cold stone corridors of medieval Europe, where the air is thick with candle smoke, the streets smell like chamber pots, and life is especially unfair if you happen to be born female. Picture this: you're emerging into the world not with celebration, but with disappointment flickering across your father's face because you're not a son. A midwife wraps you in coarse cloth, mutters a prayer, and hands you over like a burden no one asked for. From the very beginning, your worth isn't measured by your laughter, your potential, or your dreams. It's measured by how well you'll marry, how much land you'll help acquire, and how many sons you'll hopefully push into this unforgiving world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to let me know your location and what time you're listening. It's always fascinating to see where in the world we're all falling asleep together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born in a one-room wooden house with walls stuffed with straw to keep out the bitter winds. Your mother is exhausted, not just from childbirth, but from the weight of knowing that your life won't be easy. Maybe she gives you a name like Agnes or Marjorie, something sturdy, something meant to carry you through hard winters and harder expectations. The village midwife, who has delivered more babies than she has teeth, whispers to your mother that she's lucky you survived the birth, because many don't, especially not girls. Infant mortality is terrifyingly common, and even if you're born whole and healthy, disease lurks in every corner, from open fires to unclean water. Historians still argue whether female infants were intentionally neglected in some parts of Europe, but what's certain is this: your survival is not a cause for celebration. If anything, it's an economic concern. Your family now has another mouth to feed and a future dowry to scrape together. Even as an infant, you're already a liability. By the time you're 3 or 4, your role in the household is made clear. You're not climbing trees or daydreaming by the river like your brothers. Instead, you're by your mother's side, mimicking her every movement. You're taught to churn butter, sweep floors, pluck chickens, and most importantly, be quiet. Your value isn't in your voice, but in your obedience. Even your giggle is something that should be soft and ladylike. If you dare run barefoot through the mud, expect a sharp tug on your ear and a reminder that good girls stay clean and invisible. You're not allowed to attend the local parish school unless your family is unusually progressive or rich. Literacy is a luxury reserved for boys, monks, and the occasional noblewoman. Even if you do learn a few letters, don't get any ideas. Books are scarce, and the ones that exist are usually in Latin, about as useful to you as a dragon's tooth. You're reminded constantly that you are not a boy. If your mother has sons, she lavishes attention on them not because she loves them more, but because their futures matter more. A boy can inherit land, join the clergy, or become a craftsman. You're an investment, a future wife, a future mother. Your virginity is a commodity that must be protected like fine china. Don't laugh too loudly, your aunt warns you. It makes you seem loose. You don't know what that means yet, but you take the warning to heart. And when you hit your first menstrual cycle, around age 12 or 13, you're quietly taken aside and told this is your burden now. No celebration, no cake, just rags, embarrassment, and a silent new rule: hide the pain. You're a woman now, which means your suffering is supposed to be dignified and invisible. You might think life would be easier if you were born into nobility. Think again. Noble girls face a different kind of curse, the pressure to be perfect in every way. You're likely shipped off to a distant household at a young age to be fostered, which really means trained in the art of being a decorative political pawn. You learn embroidery, harp playing, and how to nod at men like you're grateful. To be in the room. You're dressed in gowns that weigh as much as a sheep and laced so tight you can't eat more than a plum without fainting. Marriage negotiations begin before you hit puberty. You hear your father discussing your future with another nobleman over wine and boar meat. You're not in the room, of course. You're not allowed in that room. Your marriage isn't about love, it's about land, alliances, and keeping the bloodline pure. Romantic, right, and don't get any rebellious ideas. The church plays backup singer to the patriarchy, harmonizing with sermons that compare women to Eve, the origin of all sin. If something bad happens, guess who gets blamed first? You do, because your body, your curiosity, your laughter, and your voice all pose threats to the fragile order of things. Even widows, those rare women with a sliver of independence, are eyed with suspicion. A woman without a man must surely be plotting something. Historians still argue whether widows in medieval towns truly had legal autonomy. But what's undeniable is that autonomy made people nervous. The safest woman was the obedient one, or the dead one. Of course, there are exceptions. A few abases command, respect, and some queens wield real political power. But these women are anomalous, celebrated more for their novelty than their normalcy. The average woman, like you, has no voice, no vote, no control. You're expected to endure silently, smile politely, and die quietly. Maybe you fantasize about escape. Maybe you watch a flock of birds overhead and wonder what it feels like to fly without consequence. But even dreams are dangerous. Daydream too long and you're accused of laziness. Speak too boldly and you're labeled a troublemaker, or worse, a heretic, and no one wants to be on the church's naughty list. That way leads to inquisitions, punishments, and whispered threats of excommunication, which in this time period might as well be a death sentence. And let's not forget the rumors. Oh, the rumors. If someone in your village gets sick, and you happened to pass their house that morning, which, if your herbs worked better than the priest's prayers, which, if you talked to a cat too fondly, which, a woman with knowledge is terrifying. A woman with silence is preferred. And so, from the moment you're born, the world subtly and not so subtly pushes you into a mold, one designed by men, maintained by tradition, and enforced by fear. Even laughter has to be calculated. Too little, and you're cold. Too much, and you're suspicious. You live life like you're walking a tightrope over a moat filled with judgment, and the pole you're balancing with. It's splintered, and yet, even in the midst of this deeply unfair system, there's an odd kind of resilience. You grow clever. You learn to read facial expressions and manipulate moments of silence. You form quiet alliances with other women, swapping stories by the bread, ovens, or washing linen by the river. You memorize the faces of kind midwives and wise old widows, women who carry secrets in their wrinkles and power in their whispers. The world may not want you to thrive, but you learn, slowly, how to survive. Sometimes that survival means biting your tongue until it bleeds. Sometimes it means laughing at the Lord's jokes, even when they sting. But through it all, you remain present, watching, waiting. You're not even 5 years old when your fingers first wrap around a broomstick. Not for play, but because it's time to learn your place. As a girl in the Middle Ages, Your childhood isn't a time of wonder or freedom, it's a slow apprenticeship. In exhaustion, there are no toys waiting for you, no lullabies about becoming something grand, no praise for imagination. Your world is a series of tasks: sweeping soot from the hearth, picking stones out of lentils, learning how not to burn the bread while the men talk politics by the fire. Your brothers might be swinging sticks at each other in a muddy field or throwing rocks into the creek, but you're dragging a sloshing bucket from the well with arms too small and muscles too soft. It's not cute, it's expected. You're told often and early that a good girl is quiet, industrious, and doesn't ask questions, especially not about why her chores always take longer than her brothers'. If you complain, you're scolded, or worse, mocked for being delicate. Which is ironic because you'll soon be tougher than any boy in your village, just not in ways anyone will value. Historians still debate whether girls' labor in the home was formally acknowledged. But practically, your life is one long internship in domestic servitude. You're not even 10, but you can already knead dough, mend a hem, and keep a fire burning through a sleet storm without blinking. And the wild thing, no one claps. This isn't achievement. This is maintenance. Maintenance of a society that depends on women's quiet suffering to keep spinning at sunrise. While dew still coats the grass, you're already awake. Your mother whispers instructions through cracked lips as she feeds the chickens and stirs the pot of watery porridge. You follow her like a shadow, not just because she's your mother, but because she's your future. Every wrinkle in her brow is a prediction. Every blister on her palm is your eventual fate. Sometimes she hums a song from her own girlhood, and you catch a glimpse of the girl she once was, buried beneath all that duty. You cling to those moments like treasures, even though no one would dare call them joy. You learn early to be useful. If your father is a blacksmith, you gather scraps and stack wood. If he's a farmer, you help scare off crows or pick peas until your fingers go numb. You learn to read the skies not for beauty, but to know if there'll be enough sun to dry the clothes or enough rain to ruin the barley. You become a weather oracle by necessity. No one asks you if you want this life. No one considers your ambitions, because those are luxuries reserved for boys or saints. You've never even heard the word ambition. You just know your job is to help, serve, smile, and not spill the milk. And gods forbid you dream too loudly. Say something like "I want to see the world," and someone will laugh until they choke on their ale. See the world. They'll echo. Your world is right here, stove to cradle to grave. Your only hope of escape is marriage, and that's a different kind of trap, one you're already being groomed for. If you're lucky, you might be sent to another household as a servant or ward, where you'll learn more advanced skills like spinning wool or pretending to be invisible when the master's sons walk by. If you're noble, you'll be taught to dance and smile through gritted teeth, to speak French or Latin just enough to be decorative, and to practice embroidery until your eyes go blurry. A well-stitched tapestry is considered your magnum opus because, heaven forbid, you write a book or argue a point. Meanwhile, boys are learning rhetoric, swordplay, philosophy. You're learning how to thread a needle while keeping your back straight and your opinions tucked in like the corners of a hospital bed. There's no such thing as privacy. You sleep beside your siblings, or with your mother, or in a loft above. The animals, if space is tight. You share everything: cups, lice. Even your thoughts feel borrowed, passed down from women who once sat in your same spot, rinsing laundry in cold rivers and wondering how long they could go without crying. When you get your first period, there's no guidebook, No sympathetic friend group armed with chocolate and heating pads. You get a hunk of cloth and a vague warning to be careful around men. Your body becomes both a secret and a spectacle. You're told to hide it, but also reminded constantly that its purity is now your family's most valuable asset. Your hips are measured with glances. Your waistline becomes public interest. Even your walk is critiqued. Too bouncy. Men will think you're eager. Too slow. You're lazy. It's like being the star of a play you didn't audition for, with no script, no stage crew, and critics on every corner. And let's not forget the church. They've got their hands in everything, from your prayers to your petticoats. You're taught that Eve caused the fall of man, that women are naturally weaker, and that suffering is holy. Your value is your modesty. Your reward is in the afterlife. Try asking why only men can become priests or scholars, and you'll be met with a condescending smile and a reminder that God made you this ways, smaller, quieter, obedient. Historians still argue whether religious instruction empowered women or oppressed them, but for you, it feels like shackles either way. Even the saints you're told to admire were either virgins, martyrs, or both. Be like Saint Cecilia, who died for her chastity. Be like Saint Margaret, swallowed by a dragon, but still virtuous. No one suggests you be like Saint Joan, because she was burned alive for wearing armor and speaking too boldly. Role models are dangerous when they inspire, so you're only given ones that instruct. Occasionally, there's a festival, a feast day, where the village throws on its second-best tunics and drinks until the pigs are nervous. For a few hours, things feel different. Music drifts through the air. You might even sneak a dance with a boy who smells like hay and hope. But when the sun rises, the illusion breaks. You're back to chores and curtsies, back to your life of invisible labor. If you're particularly bright, maybe you figure out how to read the Psalms. Maybe an old monk gives you a scrap of parchment and a wink, and you scribble your name, marveling at the magic of being seen. But it doesn't last, because soon you'll be married or promised, and the drudgery will just relocate. Your chores will change address. Your master will have a different surname, but your freedom, that was never part of the package, and still, somehow, you survive. You whisper jokes to the hens. You laugh in the fields when no one's watching. You braid your sister's hair and dream of stories where the girl doesn't die young or quietly. You find strength in tiny rebellions, in humming songs the priest says are too bawdy, in burning the porridge just enough to annoy your father, in lingering a moment longer by the stream because the sky looked like velvet and for once no one was yelling. You memorize the kindness in your grandmother's calloused hand. You write poems in your head that no one will ever read, because while the world may not have a place for you carved in stone, you still exist. And that alone, in a world that tries so hard to forget you, is its own form of resistance. You're barely into your teens when whispers begin to surround you like gnats in summer whispers, not about your talents or your thoughts, but about your virtue. And in the Middle Ages, that word carries more weight than your name, your dreams, or your pulse. Your virginity is now a form of currency, traded in glances, contracts, and negotiations where you are never present, but always the subject. You walk through your village or manor with the creeping awareness that your body is no longer just your own, it's been conscripted into the economy. Fathers calculate dowries based on your perceived chastity, and mothers fret over your modesty like a merchant guarding rare silk. Even before your breasts finish forming, you're being silently appraised, not for who you are, but for what you can offer. A womb, a legacy, a line of succession. You start noticing how often people say things like she's well behaved, or she keeps to herself. And you realize these are not compliments about your personality. They are code words for how well you're playing the game. Historians still argue whether this obsession with virginity was rooted more in religion or economics. But for you, it doesn't matter. It's a burden that weighs just as heavily, regardless of the reason. You're no longer just a daughter. You're an asset, an investment, a future breeding ground whose value decreases dramatically the moment anyone suspects. You've been kissed under a tree or looked too long at the stable boy. It's an uncomfortable truth that your virtue is treated like a brittle heirloom. Break it even metaphorically and you're considered damaged goods. And the rules aren't the same for everyone. If you're a peasant girl, your honor is guarded mostly by your family and the occasional watchful neighbor. If you're of noble birth, however, your virginity becomes a communal project. Your chaperones shadow you like prison guards. Your meals are monitored, your letters scrutinized, your gowns stitched high to hide even a hint of flesh. And yet, no matter how much fabric you wear, no matter how many prayers you whisper, the risk never vanishes. One rumor, just one, can derail your future, even if it isn't true. Especially if it isn't true. Because in a society that values reputation over reality, innocence isn't something you live, it's something you prove constantly, and with no room for error. You've seen girls banished for less. A stolen moment behind the chapel. A smile that lingered. A shadow in the wrong hallway. You learn to move carefully, speak softly, and keep your eyes down, not out of shyness, but as self-preservation. You're told you must guard your virtue like treasure. But no one tells the boys to stop looting. You've heard the horror stories, whispered while braiding hair or stirring stew, of a girl promised to a merchant's son who was found walking too close to a soldier and was sent to a convent instead of an altar. Of another who was assaulted by a lord's nephew and still blamed for leading him on. Of another whose belly began to swell before her wedding and who disappeared one night, never to be spoken of again. These tales are not rare. They're common enough to form a warning soundtrack to your adolescence, like the creak of the windmill or the clatter of hooves on cobblestones. You grow up knowing the world sees your body as a risk, a volatile commodity to be managed, controlled, and ultimately transferred to another man. Whether that man is your father, your husband, or a priest varies, but the transaction is always the same. You do not own yourself. You are owned. And yet, amidst this constant tension, there is also ritual. The rituals of becoming a woman, though no one calls them that to your face. They're often disguised as celebrations. A feast when your betrothal is arranged, gifts of ribbon or lace when your first blood comes, compliments about your hips becoming more childbearing. It's all coded, but you can read it. You're being readied. You're being polished. Your body is no longer your shelter, but your resume. Even the foods you eat are chosen to balance your humors, especially if you look pale or moody. You'll learn to smile when you want to scream, to pretend shyness when you feel rage. You learn to exist in two layers, an outer one that is always composed, and an inner one that is exhausted from pretending to be made of porcelain. You can't even cry freely, because tears might be mistaken for weakness, and weakness attracts exploitation like flies to honey. There is no space for Messinses in this performance. And let's be real, this is a performance. Perhaps most tragically, you might find yourself internalizing the lies, believing that your worth is linked to what hasn't been touched, what hasn't been done. You might watch a girl in your village walk with confidence and feel envious, not because she is bold, but because she hasn't yet been crushed by the weight of this invisible burden. Or maybe she has, saying she just wears it differently. Maybe you begin to wonder if there's freedom in shamelessness. But daring to ask these questions aloud would be dangerous. So you write them in your head, between prayers and chores and the long walk to fetch water. You don't know the word patriarchy, but you feel its breath on your neck every day. Then comes the matter of dowries. Ah yes, the charming medieval tradition of buying a husband, or rather, buying his acceptance of you. Your father must scrape together coin, livestock, linens, or land to make you appealing because, apparently, your womb isn't gift enough. If your family is poor, your dowry might mean selling a pig or promising a portion of next year's harvest. If you're rich, your dowry might bankrupt your household just to ensure you don't end up an old maid at 17. Because, heaven forbid, you stay unmarried past the age of majority, you'd be branded a spinster, a failure, a waste. Historians still debate how dowries impacted women's autonomy across different regions. But for you, it's crystal clear. Your fate is tied to a price tag. The better the offer, the fewer choices you have. It's a cruel paradoxa, only valuable when you're given away. You might think love could complicate this arrangement, and it does, but not in the way romantic stories would have you believe. If you fall for someone your family disapproves of, expect tears, threats, or worse. You might be sent away. He might vanish mysteriously, and if you dare elope, you risk being disowned, excommunicated, or dragged back by your hair. Love is not your right. It's a luxury that only men, or very wealthy women, get to chase. Your duty is to smile at your betrothed, pretend you're grateful, and hope he's not cruel. That's the best case scenario, survival through compromise. The worst case, you know it already. The bruises hidden beneath sleeves, the quiet sobs after dark. The women who disappear into marriage like water, into sand absorbed, erased, forgotten. But what if you don't want to marry? What if you feel no desire to be anyone's possession, to bear children you didn't choose, to anchor a household that was never yours? Well, there's always the convent. Cloistered life is offered up as an honorable alternative, but it's just a gilded cage with different wallpaper. Yes, you get to avoid childbirth and unwanted groping, but in return you vow obedience, poverty, and silence. Your prayers are now your job. Your opinions, once again, are irrelevant. You might write in secret, or tend to herb gardens, or illuminate manuscripts with trembling hands, but you're still under male authority. The abbot, the bishop, the pope, always a man, always above you. And so, your teenage years pass in a blur of preparation and pressure. You become an expert in reading tone, decoding glances, gauging risk. You can tell by the way a man clears his throat whether he sees you as a human or a challenge. You can tell by the way women whisper if someone's been ruined. You carry these skills like invisible armor, because they might be the only things that protect you in a world where one misstep can cost you everything. And yet, you endure. You braid lavender into your hair. You sing while scrubbing linens. You tell yourself stories where girls escape on horseback or live alone in forest cottages. You cling to the possibility, however faint, that there is more to you than what others see. And perhaps, in some parallel version of your life, you are not just a daughter or a bride or a womb. Perhaps you are a writer, a traveler, a question asker. But for now, here, in this village with its dusty roads and quiet tyranny, you must stay quiet, stay clean, stay untouched, because in the Middle Ages, your virtue is everything. and everything is never enough. By the time you're barely into your teens, perhaps 13 or 14, you realize your fate is no longer entirely your own, it belongs to the man your family chooses for you. Marriage, in the Middle Ages, is not the dreamy affair of ballads and embroidered tales. It's a business deal, a cold and calculated exchange that treats you less like a partner and more like livestock with a pulse. One day you're kneading dough and feeding chickens. The next you're being scrubbed raw, braided, and packed up like a parcel to be handed off to a stranger. You may not have spoken to him more than twice. You may not know his age, or if he snores, or if he has a temper that flares like dry straw in August. But that doesn't matter. What matters is the land he owns, the goats he brings, and the way his name bolsters your father's social status. The whole arrangement is sealed with a handshake, a cup of ale, and possibly a pig roast congratulations. You're now someone's legal possession. Historians continue to debate the legal nuances of coverture across different European regions, but in practice, the meaning is the same. Once married, your identity evaporates. You are now wife of no longer daughter, no longer girl, no longer you. Your husband owns your body, your labor, and, if you're unfortunate enough to inherit anything at all, your property. You don't even get to say no. Consent is not a word that concerns anyone in your world. It's not required, not expected, not acknowledged. You don't marry for love, you marry to survive. If love comes later, it's a miracle. If it doesn't, well, that's just what most women call reality. You try not to think too hard on the night before your wedding. You try not to notice the pity in your sister's eyes, or the tight line of your mother's mouth as she combs your hair and tucks in the last thread of your veil. There's no bridal shower, no heartfelt letters, no champagne toasts, just quiet chores and an unspoken knowledge that tomorrow you'll wake up in a different bed and that everything after that will be expected to run smoothly, no matter how bumpy it feels. On your wedding day, you walk through the village like a lamb being led to market. People cheer, but you feel numb. Your husband is already drunk, maybe to celebrate, maybe to mask his nerves, maybe just because he can. After the ceremony, you're led to the marital bed, not with romantic music or whispered sweet nothings, but often with loud expectations and sometimes even witnesses outside the door. Because yes, consummation matters more than comfort. If your sheets are not stained with blood, questions arise. If you don't scream, suspicions whisper. If you cry too loudly, no one listens. This is not intimacy. This is proof of purchase. The days that follow blur into each other. You're still rising before dawn, but now, instead of sweeping your father's hearth, you're tending your husband's. The chores remain the same, grinding grain, fetching water, baking bread, but the stakes feel heavier. You're no longer just a girl doing tasks. You're a wife being judged. Are you fast enough? Silent enough? Fertile enough? The whole village watches, waits, measures. Your husband wants sons, of course he does. Daughters are a disappointment, just like you once were. He wants strong heirs to till his fields, to fight if needed, to carry his name like a torch into the next generation. You try to oblige, though you have no idea how to try for a specific outcome. You pray to saints whose names you barely remember. You eat boiled nettles and rub concoctions on your belly and hope your womb listens. When your first child, a riser girl, of course, you force a smile. You name her something soft and holy, something that might protect her. And when your husband doesn't even bother to hold her, you hold her twice as tightly. Pregnancy becomes your full-time occupation. even when you're not pregnant. People talk about your hips, your posture, your glow, your lack of one. You live in a constant state of preparation or recovery, and both are equally brutal. There are no epidurals, no sterilized tools, no cozy hospital beds with call buttons and ice chips. You birth on straw, with a midwife whose knowledge is part instinct, part rumor, part divine guesswork. If she's good, you live. If she's not, you might bleed to death in front of your wide-eyed younger sister. And yet, people still call childbirth your greatest joy. You learn to scream quietly. You learn to breathe through the tearing. You learn to not ask why your body hurts for weeks afterward, or why some babies never breathe, or why others turn blue by the firelight and vanish before their first frost. Historians still debate maternal mortality rates, but the truth is, you don't need numbers. You've seen enough shallow graves to know it's far too common. Women disappear from village life like birds flown off in silence, and everyone pretends not to notice. Life goes on. You keep kneading, sweeping, birthing, bleeding. Your husband, meanwhile, exists in a different universe. He spends his days in the field, or the tavern, or both. If he is kind, you count your blessings. If he is not, you endure. What other choice do you have? You can't leave. There are no shelters, no legal protections, no sympathetic ears. Your priest might tell you to pray harder. Your mother might tell you to be more obedient. Your neighbors will say it's your cross to bear. You might be bruised, but he is a man, and men are allowed to be passionate. That's the word they use to excuse rage, to excuse cruelty, to excuse the way he raises his voice or his hand. You learn to walk on eggshells made of silence. You teach your children to be quiet when he drinks. You stop dreaming of escape and start hoping for a long illness to take him gently. When he finally gets a fever one winter, you sit by his bedside with dutiful hands and a calm expression, and no one notices the flicker of hope in your eyes. But he lives. Of course he does. Occasionally, you find a moment for yourself. A laugh with another wife at the well. A shared loaf of bread with a midwife who tells you about an herb that might prevent another pregnancy. A song hummed while stirring stew that reminds you of the girl you once were. These moments are fleeting, but they're yours. You gather them like beads on a string, a quiet rebellion against a life that demands everything and gives so little. In return, and once in a while, when the moon is bright and your children are asleep and your husband's snores rumble through the wooden beams, you let yourself wonder what life would have been like if you hadn't married, if you'd run away, if you'd lived in the forest and raised goats and written stories in bark and ink. But dreams are dangerous things. So you snuff them out, kiss your sleeping daughter's forehead, and rise again before the sun. Even in widowhood, freedom is an illusion. If your husband dies, the land passes to his male relatives. You might be allowed to stay in the home as a custodian until your son comes of age, but don't mistake that for power. You are tolerated, not respected. If you were childless, the village might see you as suspicious. What woman lives alone by choice? Whispers swirl around widows like chimney smoke. Too independent, and you're unnatural. Too quiet, and you're hiding something. Historians still debate whether widowhood offered real autonomy, but for most women, it's simply another phase of managing expectations, another round of survival with slightly less oversight. You might have more time, more space, fewer bruises, not more freedom. Your life is still constrained by what others think of you, still limited by laws written by men who've never bled through their shift or hidden bruises under long sleeves. Marriage, you've learned, isn't the beginning of happiness. It's the shifting of burdens. From father to husband, from girl to mother, from individual to unit. You're never just you. And yet, somehow, you endure. You find laughter in your children's games. You take pride in your garden, even when the frost comes early. You sew quietly by candlelight and imagine a world where your daughter might choose her own fate. You don't hold your breath, but you teach her anyway to read, to question, to run fast and love carefully. Because if you can't have freedom, maybe she will. Maybe, one day, women won't be bartered and bruised and bound by contracts written in blood. Maybe one day, marriage won't be a sentence, but a partnership. But tonight, as you fold the laundry and prepare for another round of pretending everything is fine, you simply hope to wake up tomorrow without a new bruise, without another scream, caught in your throat, and with enough strength to fake another smile. Because in this world, that's sometimes the closest thing to a win. Your life, now bound tightly in the folds of motherhood, begins to orbit entirely around the fragile, squalling lives you've brought into the world. You no longer rise for yourself, or your chores, or even your husband. You rise because your baby is crying again, or your toddler has wet the straw bedding, or your 6-year-old has a fever and won't open his eyes. Being a mother in the Middle Ages is not a gentle, glowing experience framed in lullabies and baby blankets. It is raw, urgent, unrelenting. Your breasts ache with milk that doesn't flow properly. Your belly never fully heals. Your body, used up and repurposed for the needs of others, barely resembles what it was when you were a girl. You're exhausted in a way sleep can't fix. And yet, no one calls you strong. No one calls you a warrior. You're not seen as heroic for surviving the 9th childbirth or staying awake for 3 nights straight because your infant was wheezing. This is just what women do. And if you're lucky, your children live past infancy. You've already buried 1 or maybe 2. The tiny shrouds still haunt your dreams. But mourning is not a luxury you can afford to indulge for long. There's always another child to feed, a diaper to clean, firewood to stack. And if your grief slows you down, people talk. She's gone soft, they'll mutter, still crying about that baby. They don't mean to be cruel. They've just seen it too often. Infant mortality is so common that it barely makes a ripple. You live in a world where babies are baptized hours after birth, not for tradition, but because death might claim them before the next sunrise. Historians still argue whether such high mortality hardened parents, emotionally or simply forced them to love more desperately in shorter bursts. But you love fiercely, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. The church bells ring out over the fields, tolling yet another funeral, another life that lasted mere weeks. You pause, press a kiss to your youngest child's damp forehead, and keep stirring the pot of barley soup. There's no space to pause for pain, no time for poetry. The kitchen needs cleaning. Your eldest is nearly 10 and already helping your husband with the fields, which is a relief because it means 1 fewer mouth to feed at midday. But it also stings because you see how quickly boyhood is traded for manhood in this world. While girls linger in girlhood only long enough to be molded into wives. Your daughter is only 8, but already neighbors comment on how pretty she is. Watch her closely, they say with knowing glances. She'll be a beauty. You don't know whether to feel pride or dread. Probably both. You wrap her, hair tighter than usual, and scold her for laughing too loudly at the well. It's not fair, and you know it, but you also know the cost of drawing attention. You remember your own mother's warnings, and the way she flinched when you once told her a boy winked at you. Now you understand. She wasn't angry at you, she was scared for you. The world turns girls into targets the moment they smile too brightly, so you teach your daughter to be cautious, modest, clever. You want her to survive. Thriving feels like too much to ask, and in your efforts to raise these children, you become a teacher, a nurse, a cook, a counselor, and a bodyguard without ever being granted the dignity of being called one. Your days are filled with the rhythm of survival, milking goats, drying herbs, mending tears in clothes, soothing teething gums with mashed garlic and stale bread soaked in wine. You whisper songs to lull babies to sleep, songs you barely remember, learning melodies passed from woman to woman like invisible heirlooms. Sometimes, when everyone is asleep, you light a candle and watch its flame dance against the wall, just for a moment of stillness. The house is quiet, and you can almost pretend you're alone with your own thoughts. You wonder what your life could have been had you been born into a different time, a different body. Maybe you would have been a healer, a midwife, a scholar. Maybe you would have traveled, seen the sea, written your name in ink on parchment that wouldn't be burned. But instead, you are here, one of countless mothers whose stories will never be told, whose names won't survive the next generation. Even your children won't speak much of you once you're gone. Not because they don't love you, but because memory is fleeting, and daily struggle leaves little room for legacy. There's always danger, lurking sickness, starvation, war. You learn to read signs the way a sailor reads waves. A neighbor coughing too much, a storm that ruins the cabbage crop, a shadow on the horizon that might be bandits or conscripted soldiers. You prepare what you can, reinforcing windows with straw, hiding the better loaf of bread under the bed, sewing coins into hems just in case. When soldiers come through town, you clutch your children close, keep your eyes on the ground, and pray they're not looking for entertainment. You know what that word means. You've seen it happen, heard it. The sound of a woman begging, the silence that follows. You know that when men with power want something, no amount of screaming stops them. The village pretends not to see. The priest says nothing from the pulpit. Because when violence is normal, resistance is dangerous. So you survive instead. You teach your daughter to survive too. Never be alone with a man, you whisper, though you know it won't always help. But it feels better than doing nothing. You hide knives in flower bins. You keep your hair tied back. You learn the names of herbs that can calm pain or end it. Quiet weapons in a world that doesn't let you carry swords. And the truth is, there are moments brief, flickering moments when joy sneaks in, when your child's laughter breaks through the heavy silence, when a neighbor brings over a honey cake, when a lamb is born and it lives and it's healthy, and it skips in the pasture with joy like it's never known hunger. These moments are rare, but they are real, and they matter more because they're rare. You learn to treasure them. You mark the seasons not just by harvests, but by memories. The spring, your son stopped coughing. The summer, your daughter learned to spin wool. The autumn, when no one died. You keep these memories like beads on a rosary, counting them on sleepless nights when your back aches and your thoughts spin too loud. The people in your life start to blur together. Faces change, neighbors come and go, but your children remain your anchor, even when they grow and leave, even when they forget to write, even when they return with new wives who call you mother but don't mean it. Eventually, your body starts to wear down. Your hands shake more. Your knees ache in the morning. You forget small things, a name, a date, The way your husband once laughed before the drink turned him sour. No one talks about menopause in your world, but you know when it's happening. The blood stops, and in its absence there's a strange, secret relief. You're no longer a vessel, no longer fertile. It feels like being released from a contract you never signed. But of course, this new phase doesn't come with celebration either. You're called old, even if you're barely past 40. Your usefulness is questioned. If you're a widow by now, you walk a precarious line. Too independent, and you're suspicious. Too needy, and you're a burden. You start to understand the strange freedom of becoming invisible. No one looks at you anymore. No one touches you. You blend into the background like furniture. It's lonely, but it's also peaceful. No more grabbing hands, no more leering eyes, just the quiet dignity of fading. Still, deep down, you wish someone would ask you about your stories, about the children you buried, the nights you fought off rats and nightmares, the times you held your family together with nothing but grit and whispered lullabies. But no one asks. So you tell the stories to yourself, over and over, like prayers. You grow old in pieces. First, your teeth go, then your balance, then your memories, softening like wool left in the rain. You sit by the fire and shell peas, or rock a grandchild whose name you forget, but whose warmth you know. You watch the world change around you, new crops, new priests, new feuds, and feel like a relic. You are not wise in the way books are wise, but you know the signs of a coming storm, the weight of grief in a neighbor's shoulders, the lie in a man's smile. Your wisdom lives in your hands, your eyes, your silences, but few ask for it. The young rush by with their own burdens, and so you sit, and you remember, and you wait. Maybe for death, maybe for peace, maybe just for a moment when someone calls you by your full name and means it. Because in a world that took your name, your body, your freedom, and your voice, all you ever wanted was to be known. Not as someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's property, but just as yourself. You sit in the corner of a smoky hall, back pressed to the rough wooden wall. Fingers busy with mending, always fixing, as though patching holes in cloth might somehow repair the holes left in you. By now, your life is measured in cycles, grain harvests, full moons, pregnancies, and deaths. You know the rhythm by heart, but today something feels different. A hush spreads across the room like spilled milk, soaking into the wooden beams and stone floor. The lord of the manor is receiving guests, and with guests come danger, gossip, and the quiet rustle of power shifting out of your reach once again. You keep your eyes low, but your ears stay sharp. It's how you survive. You hear the word tax murmured under breath, followed by levy and war. These words bring no glory for women. They bring hunger. They bring your husband, called away, or worse, your son too young to fight, too old to hide. You've already seen what happens to households left without men. A woman alone is seen as vulnerable, available, or simply unfortunate. If no man steps in to protect you, the village begins to watch you differently. Too much independence becomes suspicious. Too much grief becomes a performance. Too little becomes guilt. You can't win. Historians often romanticize the communal life of medieval villages, and yes, there is community shared bread, laughter by the well, collective prayers, but it's also a cage of judgment, especially for women. Privacy is a myth. Your business is everyone's business. Who came to your door last night? Why did your candle burn so late? Was that a man's voice in your barn? Innocent or not, your reputation clings to you like the scent of fish impossible to wash out once it sticks. If your husband is conscripted, you're expected to manage the household in his absence, but don't mistake that for empowerment. You're not granted legal controls, just responsibility. The pigs still need slopping, the children still need feeding, and the local reeve still demands taxes on time. If the harvest fails, the Lord doesn't care about your missing manpower. You're expected to scrape by, to spin straw into gold ore, more accurately, debt into sustenance. And if your husband never returns, well, that opens a whole new kind of vulnerability. You may be allowed to remain on the land as a widow tenant, but only if the Lord is lenient. Sometimes he isn't. Sometimes he decides the land needs new blood, and you are quietly removed, your home handed to a younger couple, perhaps one with sons. You and your children might be allowed to stay as servants, or not. Your life becomes a question mark, hanging in the air, unspoken but always present. You work harder than ever, but the rewards shrink. People avert their eyes when you pass, unsure if you're cursed or simply unlucky. You begin to understand how easily women can vanish from history, not with violence, but with silence. And yet, you endure. You find small ways to hold on to meaning. You carve symbols into the wood of your doorway, part Christian, part older magic, handed down from grandmothers who remembered things that the church says should be forgotten. A knot of protection, a twist of 3 leaves for luck. You tend your herb garden with the knowledge whispered from woman to woman, half medical, half myth. Feverfew for headaches, mugwort for dreams, pennyroyal for things best not spoken aloud. You're no healer. Officially, healers are often watched closely, especially if they're women without husbands, but you know enough to help your neighbors, and they pay you in eggs or gossip. You become a small center of quiet power, the kind no man acknowledges but many rely on, and you know the risks. One wrong cure, one lost child, one priest in a foul mood, and you could be branded a witch. That word, witch, it hangs over wise women like a hawk circling overhead. Historians still argue how widespread witch hunts were in this era, but even one accusation is too many when you're the one being whispered about. You keep your head down. You speak softly, but inside you bristle. You're tired of pretending. Your knowledge is dangerous. You're tired of being afraid of your own wisdom. Religion continues to shape every aspect of your life, whether or not you believe it all. The church decides what days you fast, what you eat, who you confess to, how you give birth, how you die, and what happens to your soul afterward. Saints become your role models, but the female ones are a grim lot, martyrs with torn limbs, virgins who chose death over defilement, nuns who turned their backs on the world entirely. There are no saints who were mothers like you, no saints who buried children, who stitched until their fingers bled, who gave birth in barns and kept whole families alive on broth and prayer. Your form of holiness doesn't fit in stained glass. You confess your sins, though half the time you're not sure what counts as sin anymore. Is it a sin to resent your husband, to envy a childless widow, to dream of freedom while stirring soup? You try to feel guilty. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't. The priest says to be humble, obedient, grateful. He has never spent a night in labor or gone hungry to feed a child. So you smile, kneel, and say your penance. Then go home and do it all again. War creeps closer, and with it, fear. Refugees pass through the village, their faces hollow, their stories worse. Some say a town was burned to ash. Others whisper of soldiers taking what they wanted: women, food, gold, and leaving corpses behind. You don't know what's true. You don't want to know. You simply pack your valuables in a sack and hide them under the hearth. You teach your children how to run, not fight. You memorize the sound of hooves. You learn how to tell the difference between friend and foe by the color of a flag or the angle of a helmet. When the soldiers finally arrive, mercenaries with mud-caked boots and eyes that never stop scanning you, hold your daughter's hand so tightly that your knuckles turn white. They ask for bread. You give them what you have. They take more. One man lingers too long, his eyes crawling over you like ants. You force a laugh, pretend to be older than you are, mention your non-existent husband. Sometimes lying is the only magic you have. They leave. You exhale. You live. This time, afterward, the village is not the same. Doors are reinforced. Girls walk in pairs. The laughter that once floated over the fields now sounds brittle, nervous. You help rebuild what's broken, patch what's torn, feed what's starving. Your hands never stop moving. They are tools now, worn smooth from use. No one writes songs about women like you, but maybe they should. You are the reason life continues. You are the bridge between before and after. You are the keeper of rituals, of recipes, of remedies. You are the memory of a world that doesn't even know it's forgetting you. You teach the young to sow, to knead, to notice the signs of sickness. You tell stories in the dark ones, with clever girls and gentle animals, and endings that don't always hurt. You create little pockets of safety in a world that has none. And in your quiet way, you resist. You teach your daughters to read, even if the priest disapproves. You share herbs that help with unwanted pregnancies. You remind the boys that kindness is not weakness. You plant more than just seeds in your garden. You plant survival, one lesson at a time. Time passes, and you become the old woman, the one. Children whisper about some fear you, others adore you. You don't care either way. You've earned your silence, your solitude, your small rituals. You sit by the fire and let the world rush past without you. You've seen too much to be surprised anymore. You know that nothing changes quickly, not for women, not really. But still, you hope. You hope your granddaughter won't be married off before she's ready. You hope someone will ask you about your life before it's too late. You hope that someday women won't have to be saints or witches or martyrs just to be noticed. You hope to die with your name spoken softly, with a hand holding yours, with a prayer that doesn't demand you be grateful for suffering. And maybe you hope someone will remember you not for what you endured, but for how fiercely you lived. The air grows colder as another winter settles over your village, a slow, creeping frost that seeps into the walls, the marrow of your bones, and the routine of your life. Each year the cold feels sharper, more intrusive, and though you've lived through dozens of them, the hardship never becomes easier. You rise in the dark, as always, blowing gently on your fingers to warm them before reaching for kindling, the same way you've done since girlhood. Your joints ache more, no years of scrubbing, bending, lifting, and surviving have worn them out like the soles of your old shoes, but rest isn't an option. Not when the hearth must be lit before the children wake, not when the last of the root vegetables need boiling into something edible, not when the firewood stack is already half gone and it's only December. Hunger is not an abstract fear here. It's a daily companion, as familiar as your own breath. During these months, you stretch flour with ash, milk with water, hope with lies. There's enough, you say, even when your own stomach twists with emptiness. You break your bread in smaller pieces so others can eat. You gnaw on the bone after everyone else is finished, chewing it until your jaw aches. Not for nourishment, but for something to fill the void. And you pray not always to the saints, but sometimes just to the cold itself, bargaining with it. Like an old enemy, spare us this year, and I'll let the goats sleep indoors. Let the frost pass, and I won't complain about the cracks in the walls. Whether it listens is another matter entirely. Despite the hardship, the rhythm continues. You've learned that women don't get to pause when things become unbearable. You simply shift into another gear, carrying more than before, moving slower but always forward. Even in these dark months, you are responsible for everything: clothing the children in worn layers, mending shoes with scraps, keeping embers alive, and remembering who had the last egg 2 days ago. Illnesses rise with the smoke curling from chimneys. Coughs turn to fevers, fevers to silence. You know how to wrap the chest in mustard cloth, how to draw out heat with vinegar rags, how to whisper songs that make dying seem less frightening. But knowledge doesn't always mean power. Sometimes you watch helplessly as someone slips away, their breath slowing in your lap while you recite psalms and try not to cry, because tears won't make the fire burn brighter. Historians still debate the medical knowledge of women in the Middle Ages, how much they knew, how much was lost, how much was stolen, but you know the truth. Women knew what they needed to know, even when others dismissed them. Healing passed through hands, not books. And when those hands grew old, as yours are now, that wisdom passed on again, or was buried with the bones of the ones who held it. You've outlived many, neighbors, friends, even some of your own children. You no longer ask why. There's no time for such questions. Instead, you focus on the tasks that never end. Life doesn't care about your grief. The chickens still need feeding. The roof still leaks. The water still needs fetching. Grief becomes a quiet companion, a shadow in the corner of your vision that never fully leaves, but no longer startles you either. You speak to your dead in whispers while folding laundry, stirring broth, watching snow fall outside the tiny window. Did you see the frost today? You murmur to a daughter long buried. Your brother's cough is worse again. No one hears. No one needs to. It comforts you. Sometimes you hear them reply, not in words, but in memory, her laugh when she spilled milk, the weight of her sleeping against your chest. You smile, but it doesn't reach your eyes. Those smiles are rare now, thin like winter sunlight. The world no longer expects them from you, which is a relief. You are allowed to be somber. You are expected to be tired. You fulfill those roles well. Your body continues its slow betrayal. The strength in your hands wanes. Your back curves more, and you begin to forget names. Small ones, at first Anne, Herb, a cousin, a festival date. You try to hide it, especially from the younger women who now turn to you for advice. You've become what you never imagined you would. The village elder, the crone, the one who remembers the flood, the famine, the time when wolves came too close to the fields. They ask you how to soothe colic, how to cleanse a wound, how to keep a fire burning during a snowstorm. You tell them, glad for the purpose, even if your voice trembles with the effort. You pass on recipes, not just for stews, but for resilience. Boil it longer than you think, you say. Add a little salt, even when it's sweet. Be patient. They nod, grateful, unaware that you're not just talking about soup. Sometimes you laugh at how much you know, how much you wish you hadn't learned the hard way. You want to tell them about the pain of stillbirth, the terror of bandits, the shame of knowing you're more tired than your bones should allow. But you don't. Not all lessons need repeating. Some can die with you. You watch the village change in subtle ways. New buildings, new names, a few new ideas that float in from travelers and peddlers. You hear whispers of other places, cities, with more books than people, lands where women can inherit, where healers are called doctors. You don't know if it's true. You want it to be. But it's hard to imagine a world where a woman's voice is not a warning sign, where your thoughts aren't judged sinful or silly. You hope your granddaughter might live to see it. She's clever, after all, always asking questions, always watching. You teach her what you can, how to spin flax, how to read the sky, how to move silently when needed. You try to shield her from the worst parts of the world, though you know that's a fantasy. The world will come for her too. But maybe, just maybe, it'll be gentler. Maybe your quiet strength will echo in her, guiding her through storms she hasn't seen yet. She wraps her arms around you sometimes, just because, and in those moments you feel seen. Truly seen, not as a vessel or a servant or a relic, but as a person. And still, the church looms large. The village priest is younger now, full of fire and judgment, preaching against idleness, lust, vanity, all the usual things that somehow fall hardest on women. He preaches in Latin, even though half the village doesn't understand, and warns of hellfire for those who speak out of turn or skip confession. You listen politely, then return to your work. You've made your peace with the parts of religion that don't make sense. You light candles for the saints you like and ignore the ones who never seem to help. You pray in your own way, through action, through kindness, through endurance. You believe in something, though whether it's God or simply the need to believe, you're not sure anymore. You've seen too many good people die young, too many cruel ones prosper, but you still whisper. Prayers, when a child is sick, still mark feast days with careful reverence. Faith, like everything else, is a ritual, a rhythm, a comfort you wrap around yourself like a shawl. As spring finally breaks through, the village stirs with energy. Babies are born, calves wobble into the fields, and people begin to smile again, though cautiously. You feel the warmth on your face and close your eyes, pretending, just for a moment, that you're young again, running barefoot through the wet grass, your hair loose and wild. You pretend you're laughing, unburdened by grief or duty. The fantasy lasts only a second, but it's enough to lift your heart. You open your eyes to the present, where you are still here, still standing, still capable of holding others up, even as you falter. This, you think, is your true legacy, not in what you owned or who you married, but in the quiet, invisible scaffolding you've built within your community. The recipes, the songs, the little warnings about which mushroom not to eat. These are your fingerprints on the world. No statue will bear your name. No book will carry your face. But generations will walk roads you paved with effort and care. And they will never know it was you who made their lives a little safer, a little softer. And so the days go on. You accept the creaks in your bones, the fading of your sight, the forgetting of small things. What matters remains, the warmth of hands in yours, the rhythm of your heartbeat as you lie awake and listen to the night. You hear owls calling, wind rustling through thatched roofs, the occasional murmur of livestock. You're not afraid of the dark anymore. You haven't been in years. Darkness is rest, not threat. You lie back, letting memories play like firelight across the walls of your mind. There is no more fear of being alone, because you've spent a lifetime being surrounded by souls you carried, comforted, fed, healed. Some are still here, some are gone, but all of them remain with you, woven into the fabric of who you are. A woman, a survivor, a keeper of life. The sound of bells ringing in the far-off abbey breaks the stillness of morning, echoing faintly over the dew-wet fields, a reminder that time continues its slow march even when your own body would rather rest. You stretch stiffly from your straw mattress, joints protesting as they do every day now, and step into the same worn shoes you've patched a dozen times. The floor is cold against your feet, the air sharper than it was last week, and you already know it'll be one of those days when your bones feel like stone and every movement costs something. But you rise anyway, because you always do. No one expects the old to rest here, not if you can still hold a broom or peel a turnip. Being old, as a woman in the Middle Ages, isn't a reward. It's another phase of labor, only quieter and more invisible. People assume your mind is fading because your voice is softer, your back is bent, and your eyes squint in the sun. You become a background figure, the one asked for help but not for opinion, the one everyone greets politely but doesn't really hear. You've earned your place through decades of toil, yet now you find your presence barely registers unless something needs mending, cooking, or fixing. This quiet erasure is its own kind of cruelty. Historians still argue whether elderly women held a respected place within medieval households or were viewed as burdens. But from where you stand, hands stained with beet juice, apron damp from rinsing cloth, respect seems conditional on usefulness. And you, determined as ever, keep proving you're still useful, still here. Still more than just a shadow in the corner. You spend your days with the rhythm of habit, tending a small patch of herbs near the door, sorting lentils from grit, folding linen so smooth and even it looks like river stones stacked in a basket. Young women come to you, sometimes shyly, sometimes boldly, asking how to fix a boil, how to ease a birth, how to tell if a man's kindness is real or just a prelude to ownership. You answer them honestly, in whispers or gestures, because it's safer that way. You still remember the sting of speaking too plainly. The time you told a girl to run before the wedding and her father threatened to have you punished for sewing. Rebellion, that was years ago, but you've never forgotten the fury in his voice, or the quiet relief on the girl's face as she fled. Now you choose your words more carefully, shaping truths in ways that don't bruise too hard. You've become fluent in the language of implication. There is strength in subtlety, even if it goes unpraised. And so you teach in riddles, in stories, in recipes that double as warnings. Don't add too much time, you say, while chopping onions. It can make a man dream strange things. They nod, pretending not to understand, but you see the knowledge flicker behind their eyes. Your life's wisdom isn't written down in books or recorded by monks, it lives in meals. In moments, in the murmurs passed from one set of calloused hands to another dot at the edge of the village. The abbey looms like a holy mountain, its stone walls cool and clean, its windows painted with saints who never had to cook for 12 or stitch clothes by candlelight. The sisters inside live differently, and part of you envies them their order, their learning, their relative safety. They don't have husbands. They don't bear children. They answer to God alone, and while their lives are far from easy, at least they have control. You sometimes wonder what might have happened if you'd been sent there young. If someone had decided your path lay in service to Christ instead of to a husband, a family, a farm. You imagine yourself in a white wimple, copying scriptures with ink-stained fingers, debating theology with the abbess, instead of arguing with the butcher over the price of liver. But you weren't chosen for that life. You were chosen for this one, or rather, it was chosen for you. Your path was marked the day you were born, a girl in a house without much land. And though you've never seen yourself as pious, you find holiness in other places, in the steam rising from fresh bread, in the hush of snowfall, in the way your granddaughter's hand finds yours without looking. Your prayers are practical, not for heaven, but for a dry spring, not for salvation, but for survival. Word of change drifts in with the traveler's news of foreign lands, of kings deposed, of a woman who rode into battle wearing armor like a man. You barely dare believe it, this story of Joan, this peasant, girl who speaks to saints and terrifies armies. The younger women are breathless with the tale, their eyes wide, their imaginations ablaze. Can you imagine? One whispers, a girl like us, leading men. You nod slowly, hiding your fear beneath pride. Stories like this are dangerous. Powerful women are rarely left standing, and yet something inside you stirs an ember long, cold, suddenly warm again. You remember how fiercely you once fought to be heard, to be more than a vassal or a servant. Perhaps the world is changing, even if slowly, even if painfully. Perhaps the next generation won't have to bend quite so low. Still, you caution them. Not all men are pleased when women rise. You murmur, slicing radishes with practiced ease. And not all saints are safe. They nod, less excited now, but more thoughtful. You've seen enough to know that change often arrives wrapped in fire. Sometimes it warms, sometimes it burns. The seasons roll forward, as they always do. Spring with its promise, summer with its sweat, autumn with its slow dying, and winter with its cruel patience. You endure them all with quiet grit. And each year, more people turn to you not just for advice, but for comfort, for presence. You're no longer invisible. You're something more like a landmark now. Ask her, they say. She'll know. You've outlived your husband, your siblings, even some of your children, and still you endure. The young men bow slightly when they pass you. The priest includes you in prayers without naming you directly. You are not celebrated, but you are respected, and that is enough. You find yourself humming old tunes, ones your mother sang, ones you passed on without realizing it. Music is another kind of inheritance, one that doesn't need land or coins. When your bones ache too much to leave your stool, you hum to yourself and smile. You've given the world more than it ever gave you. There are days when you wake unsure of the year, the season, even your name. But those moments pass, and in their place comes the comfort of routine. You brush your hair, sparse though it is. You sip warm broth. You watch the sun move across the same patch of floorboards as it has for decades. And sometimes someone visits daughter's daughter, or a neighbor boy who once skinned his knee and remembers how you bandaged it with honey and bark. They sit with you, tell you the news, ask you about the old days. You laugh and pretend you remember more than you do. The stories blur now, past and present, tangled like thread in a basket. But it doesn't matter. The feelings remain, even if the dates slip away. You were there, you lived it. That's enough. And on the rarest of nights, you dream not of hardship or hunger, but of running through fields as a girl. Wind in your hair, nothing yet decided, the whole world unwritten. You know your end is near, not from any pain, but from the quiet peace that has settled in your chest. You've done your part. You've endured every curse the world threw at you: poverty, childbirth, grief, silence, and you transformed them all into strength, into survival, into stories that echo in the mouths of children who will never know your name. And as you lie back one evening, blanket pulled to your chin, the fire crackling low, you feel something close to gratitude, not for the suffering, but for the wisdom it forced upon you, not for the hardship, but for the tenderness it taught you to crave. You close your eyes, not afraid, not sad, just ready. You lived as a woman in the Middle Ages. You bore the weight of centuries, quietly, humbly, fiercely, and now, finally, you get to rest. Asterisk. The dawn breaks slowly over the thatched roofs of your village, the pale light seeping through cracks in the wooden shutters, and you find yourself awake again before the household stirs. The cold seeps in, as always, and your hands move almost automatically to build the fire, coaxing life back into the embers you carefully saved from the night before. This morning, like so many before it, brings with it the heavy weight of responsibilities you carry quietly on your bent shoulders, fetching water, preparing porridge, mending the frayed edges of worn clothing, all under the watchful eyes of neighbors who expect you to manage without complaint, no matter how little help you receive. Your life in this era has been one long lesson in endurance, a steady march through hardship where your body has been both a tool and a battleground. You've learned to hide your pain behind a calm face, to speak only when necessary, and to measure your desires carefully so they don't become liabilities. You understand the unspoken rules. A woman who asks too much, who speaks too loudly, or who shows too much anger risks not only her reputation but her safety. You've seen what happens to those who step outside the lines: whispered rumors, cold shoulders, even accusations of witchcraft. The gravest danger for women like you, whose knowledge and independence provoked fear more than admiration. Historians still debate how pervasive such accusations were in rural villages during your lifetime, but from experience, you know they hung over women like a dark cloud, a constant threat that forced you into silence and caution. Despite this, you find ways to claim your small corners of power gardening herbs that soothe pain, stitching charms into clothing, and teaching younger girls the skills they'll need to survive a harsh world. These quiet acts are your rebellion and your legacy, subtle yet vital in a society that refuses to acknowledge women's strength openly. Your thoughts drift to the children you have raised, many of whom have already left this world, carried off by disease or famine that struck like a thief in the night. The loss is etched deeply into your soul, a well of grief you draw from silently but never fully reveal. Yet, the living children, your grandchildren, now bring light into your weary days. Their laughter, a fragile thread connecting you to the future. You teach them old songs and stories, tales woven with wisdom and warnings, passing on traditions that are both your armor and your gift. You hope these stories will protect them, give them courage when they face the brutal realities of medieval life: early marriages, laborious work, and the constant shadow of death. You watch your granddaughter carefully, noting her sharp mind and fierce spirit, qualities that might allow her to carve a better life, or at least survive it with more grace than you have managed. You remind her to watch her words, to respect the village customs, but also to remember her worth beyond marriage and motherhood. Such lessons are dangerous in this time, but necessary. You recognize in her the same hunger for knowledge and freedom that once burned quietly inside you before life's relentless demands dulled your hopes. The village is preparing for the feast of St. John. a rare moment when burdens are set aside and the community gathers in celebration under flickering torchlight. You help with the preparations, peeling vegetables and grinding grain, your movements slower now but still precise. The feast is a respite from the daily grind, a reminder of life's fleeting joys. Though even in celebration, the weight of your reality presses against the edges. Women like you are seldom the focus of these events. The spotlight falls on younger faces, on marriage arrangements, on the Lord's generosity. You watch quietly from the shadows, sipping watered wine and smiling at children who don't yet understand the fragility of their happiness. As the music swells and the village dances, you remember your own youth when you first attended such gatherings, full of hope and fear mingled like fire and smoke. You think of the men you married and the ones you loved, and the countless ways your choices were limited by the customs and laws that dictated a woman's place. Marriage was never a contract of equals, but a transfer of ownership from father to husband, with little regard for your desires or consent. You recall the dread of wedding nights, the cold reality of pregnancies that followed too quickly, and the relentless expectation to produce heirs as proof of your worth. These memories rise unbidden, bittersweet and raw, but you breathe deeply and let them pass, focusing instead on the present moment, the laughter around you, and the tiny sparks of hope flickering in the eyes of the young. Your body aches in ways that words cannot capture the deep, persistent fatigue of decades spent bending over chores and children, the sharp pangs that remind you of pregnancies that nearly claimed you, the stiff joints that protest every movement. Pain is a constant companion, one that you have learned to ignore until it becomes unbearable. You apply salves made from comfrey and willow bark, remedies taught to you by your mother and her mother before her, knowledge passed down through generations of women whose work was invisible to history but essential to survival. These herbs are your medicine, your comfort, your connection to a line of ancestors who faced the same struggles and found ways to endure. The scent of the plants mingles with the smoke of the fire and the damp earth beneath your feet, grounding you in a world that is as harsh as it is beautiful. Despite the suffering, there is a quiet pride in knowing you have weathered storms that would break lesser spirits. You are a survivor, molded by hardship, shaped by love and loss, and defined not by your limitations, but by the strength with which you faced them. This strength is not lauded in songs or stories, is whispered in the wind, carried in the hands of the women who come after you, and hidden in the wrinkles that trace your face like a map of a hard-lived life. The church remains a powerful force in your life, shaping not only your beliefs, but your very existence. Its doctrines dictate the rhythms of your days. Fasting, prayer, confession, and obedience are expected without question. The local priest, a stern man with little patience for doubt, often reminds you and other women of your proper roles as obedient daughters, wives, and mothers, reinforcing the idea that your worth lies in submission and service. Yet, within the walls of the church, you find moments of solace, a quiet space to mourn, to hope, to seek forgiveness, not just for sins, but for the pain and fatigue that weigh heavy on your soul. The saints painted in stained glass watch over you, their stories a mix of martyrdom, purity, and sacrifice, none of which fully capture your experience, but all of which remind you that suffering has its place in the divine plan. You wrestle with faith in your private moments, questioning why hardships fall so disproportionately on women, why so many of your daughters and granddaughters have been lost to famine and disease. Historians still argue whether medieval women found empowerment through religion or was simply further constrained by its strictures. But for you, faith is both a balm and a burden, comfort in the face of the unknown, and a reminder of the limits imposed upon your gender. Outside the village, the world is changing, though slowly and often cruelly. Rumors of wars, plagues, and shifting alliances filter in with traveling merchants and weary pilgrims. You listen with a mixture of fear and curiosity, knowing these distant events will ripple through your life, bringing soldiers who take men away, taxes that drain your meager resources, and sometimes new ideas that challenge old ways. Change is a double-edged sword. It can bring relief or devastation, freedom or further oppression. You watch as the younger generation grapples with these forces, some embracing new knowledge and others clinging desperately to tradition. You try to prepare your grandchildren for this uncertain future, teaching them resilience, caution, and the importance of community. You emphasize the value of kindness and quiet strength, knowing that in a world that often dismisses women's voices, these qualities can be both shield and sword. Your nights are often restless, filled with dreams that drift between memories and hopes. You see faces long gone and those yet to come, hear laughter and cries mingling in the darkness. Sleep is a precious, elusive gift, interrupted by aches, worries, and the sounds of the village settling for the night. Yet, in those fleeting moments of rest, you find peace, a reminder that despite all the hardships, you have lived, loved, and survived. You hold on to this peace as you drift between wakefulness and sleep, knowing that your story, though unsaid and often forgotten, is a thread woven into the vast tapestry of history. You are a woman of the Middle Ages, a witness to its curses and its fragile beauties, and through your endurance, you have carved a space for yourself in a world that too often sought to erase you. Asterisk. The cold light of dawn seeps in again through the cracks in your door, and you wake with a familiar ache curling deep in your belly. A mixture of hunger and the persistent dull throb that decades of labor have etched into your bones. Outside, the village stirs slowly to life, the muted sounds of carts creaking over muddy roads, roosters crowing somewhere beyond the fields, and children's bare feet thudding on the dirt path. You rise carefully, mindful of each movement, knowing that every step is both a gift and a challenge, a testament to the stubbornness that has kept you alive through more winters than you can count. Your hands, rough and scarred, move automatically to light the hearth fire, coaxing warmth from cold ashes as your mind drifts to the weight of your existence, the unyielding expectations, the endless chores, the sharp limitations imposed by a society that sees women as possessions rather than people. Yet, despite the weight, you carry on, because surrender is not an option when you are the backbone of your family and your village, the silent force keeping the fragile wheels of life turning. The world outside may be indifferent, sometimes cruel, but inside your small domain, you wield a quiet power born of resilience, knowledge, and an unbreakable will to survive. Historians still debate how much autonomy medieval women truly had, but from where you stand onto dusk, year after year, you know that your strength lies not in titles or wealth, but in the relentless, unseen labor that holds the world together. Your thoughts flicker to the younger women who come to you with their fears and questions about childbirth, about marriage, about the strange aches and fears they dare not voice openly. You teach them what you know, how to ease the pain of labor with herbs like valerian and rue, how to spot the signs of illness before the village healer or priest can intervene, how to hide a secret if necessary. The knowledge you share is both gift and protection, passed from woman to woman in a world that punishes too much independence. You remember the day you learned these skills yourself, in the soft shadows of your mother's kitchen, the air thick with the scent of boiling herbs and warm bread, and you feel a kinship with the generations before you who survived through similar trials. That knowledge is your inheritance, a lifeline amid the harsh realities of medieval life. You also share the quirky, lesser-known remedies, like the use of crushed spider webs to stop bleeding, or the curious practice of carrying a live toad in a pouch for protection against evil spirits. Such folk wisdom, dismissed by some, has saved lives and calmed minds in ways no priest's prayer could. You chuckle softly to yourself as you recall the look on a young girl's face when you told her about the power of wearing a piece of iron against the skin to ward off night. Superstition, perhaps, but one that offered comfort in a world full of darkness. These rituals, whether rooted in faith or folklore, weave a complex tapestry of survival that outsiders may never understand. Life's harshness is never far away. The recent years of bad harvests and harsh winters have left the village strained, and you feel the pinch keenly. Food is scarce, and every meal is a negotiation between necessity and desperation. You stretch what little grain you have, baking thin, hard bread that barely satisfies hunger but keeps starvation at bay. Meat is a luxury that appears only on feast days or as a rare gift from a traveling noble. You watch as children grow thinner, their laughter more brittle, their eyes dull with exhaustion. The village healer is overwhelmed, and the local priest's sermons have taken on a more urgent, fearful tone, warning of sin and divine punishment. You know better that sometimes suffering comes not from divine wrath, but from chance, from the cruel whims of weather and war. You prepare your family for the worst, hiding what little food you can, teaching your grandchildren to gather wild herbs and roots that might fill empty bellies. The memory of a particularly harsh famine lingers in your mind, the year when neighbors disappeared without a trace, and the churchyard filled faster than usual. Those losses are etched into your memory like scars, reminders of life's fragility and the thin line you walk every day between survival and despair. The burden of motherhood, which once filled your days and nights, has shifted into something quieter but no less profound. You are now the grandmother, the keeper of family stories, the steady presence in a world of change and uncertainty. Your role has evolved from one of constant labor to one of guidance and remembrance. You hold the stories of your ancestors close, recounting tales of resilience and sorrow to the wide-eyed children who gather at your feet. You speak of weddings arranged without love, of battles fought by men who never returned, of the saints who watched silently as life unfolded in all its brutal beauty. Your stories are a mix of fact and folklore, a blend of history and hope, designed to teach, to warn, and to inspire. You remind the young women that their worth is not solely tied to marriage or childbirth, that their minds and spirits hold power even in a world that often tries to diminish them. You caution them to be wary of false promises and to hold fast to their own sense of self, lessons learned through bitter experience. It is a delicate balance, giving hope without fostering dangerous dreams, instilling strength without breeding resentment. You are a bridge between past and future, a living repository of wisdom earned through pain and perseverance. The Church's influence is ever present, shaping not only your daily routines, but also your very identity. Its teachings permeate every aspect of life, from the sacraments that marked birth, marriage, and death, to the strict codes of behavior imposed on women. You attend Mass regularly, observing the rituals with a mix of reverence and quiet skepticism. The sermons often emphasize women's roles as obedient wives and mothers, warning against pride, vanity, and disobedience. You have witnessed firsthand how these messages reinforce the social order, limiting women's opportunities and silencing dissent. Yet, within the walls of the church, you also find moments of solace and community, a place where you can grieve openly, share burdens, and find brief respite from the demands of daily life. The local nuns offer what little education is available to girls, and you encourage your granddaughter to learn what she can, knowing that knowledge is a fragile form of freedom. You watch with cautious hope as the winds of change blow faintly through the monastery halls, carrying whispers of reform and new ideas that may one day alter the rigid structures confining women like you outside the village. The wider world presses in with the inexorable force of history. News travels slowly but surely, tales of wars that steal young men from their homes, of plagues that sweep through towns, leaving devastation in their wake, of kings who rise and fall with alarming rapidity. You listen to these stories with a mixture of dread and curiosity, understanding that while your life feels small and contained, it is part of a vast, turbulent mosaic. The arrival of soldiers, the imposition of new taxes, the shifting allegiances among nobles, all these ripple through your existence, bringing uncertainty and sometimes tragedy. You prepare your family as best you can, teaching vigilance and caution, encouraging the young to be adaptable and wary. Change is inevitable, but survival requires both resilience and cunning. You have learned this through decades of experience, and you pass it on with quiet urgency. Despite the hardships, moments of joy and connection persist. The warmth of a child's laughter, the shared meal after a long day, the soft glow of candlelight during evening prayers, these small treasures sustain you. You find comfort in the rhythms of nature, the blooming of wildflowers, the return of migratory birds, the changing patterns of the stars. These cycles offer a sense of continuity and hope amid the chaos of human affairs. You treasure the friendships forged over years, the shared secrets and silent support among the women of the village. These relationships are lifelines, offering strength and understanding that the broader world often denies you. In these bonds, you find a measure of freedom, the ability to be seen and heard, even if only briefly and in limited ways. As the years weigh heavier on your shoulders, you become more reflective, contemplating the legacy you will leave behind. You know that history will rarely record the lives of women like you, their names lost, their stories untold. Yet, you take solace in the knowledge that your impact is woven into the fabric of your community, in the skills you have taught, the lives you have nurtured, and the resilience you have embodied. Your survival is itself an act of defiance against a world that sought to diminish you. You have borne the curses of your time with dignity and strength, creating a quiet revolution through endurance and care. Your story, though often unspoken, is a vital thread in the tapestry of human history, a testament to the power of women who live and love in the shadows of a harsh and unforgiving age. You awaken to the familiar chill of morning, the faint light seeping through your shuttered window, casting long shadows across the earthen floor. Your body protests each movement, creaking like the worn hinges of your cottage door, but you rise anyway, driven by the relentless demands of a life shaped by hardship and duty. The world around you stirs, slowly, farmhands readying themselves for another day of toil. Children's voices weaving through the crisp air, and the soft clatter of pottery as neighbors begin their chores. You wrap a threadbare shawl around, your shoulders, the fabric thin from years of use, and step outside, breathing in the damp earth and wood smoke that define your existence. The weight of centuries presses down on you not in the form of ancient stones or regal decrees, but as the invisible chains of expectation and limitation placed on you simply because you were born a woman in this unforgiving era. Yet within these bounds you have carved out a space for yourself, a fragile yet unyielding domain of knowledge, care, and quiet power that sustains not only your family but your entire community. Historians debate how much agency women truly held in medieval society, but your life, woven with resilience and wisdom, tells a story far richer than any textbook might reveal. As you move through your daily tasks, your mind drifts to the countless times you have been called upon to heal and nurture. The village healer, often a woman like yourself, armed with little more than herbs, prayer, and experiences, a linchpin in this fragile world, where sickness and injury lurk in every shadow. You recall how, as a young girl, your mother taught you to identify the subtle differences between a harmless rash and the early signs of the plague, how to prepare poultices from comfrey leaves and willow bark, and when to call for the priest's blessing or the apothecary's aid. These lessons were not written in books, but learned through observation, whispered warnings, and hard-won trial and error. You chuckle softly, remembering the odd folk remedies you once employed, like the curious practice of tying a live toad around a child's neck to ward off convulsions, or using crushed spider webs to staunch bleeding superstitions that sometimes brought relief, other times suspicion. These practices, a blend of ancient wisdom and desperate hope, have been passed down through generations, a testament to women's enduring ingenuity in the face of neglect and dismissal. You share these stories with the younger women who come seeking guidance, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination, reminding them that survival often depends on knowledge hidden in plain sight. Your thoughts turn to marriager, cornerstone of your life's story and a source of both security and sorrow. You remember the day your hand was given in marriage, a transaction more than a union, negotiated by fathers and elders with little regard for your feelings or desires. The ceremony was solemn, the words in Latin foreign to your ears, and the weight of expectation heavier than the heaviest cloak. Marriage meant subservience, the surrender of autonomy, and the beginning of a lifetime of labor-bearing children, managing the household and obeying your husband. You recall the nights of loneliness, the sharp edges of disappointment, and the quiet moments of resistance when you dared to hope for something more. Childbirth brought both joy and terror, a painful rite of passage that claimed many women's lives, including some you loved dearly. You have buried children, mourned silently, and pressed on, knowing that your worth was measured by your ability to endure and produce heirs. Yet, beneath this harsh reality, you nurtured small rebellions, secret prayers for freedom, stolen moments of laughter with other women, and the fierce protection of your family that defied the limits imposed upon you. These acts of quiet defiance are the threads that weave through your life's tapestry, revealing a strength that refuses to be extinguished. The Church, an omnipresent force in your world, shapes your daily rituals and moral compass. Its teachings reinforce the strict roles assigned to women, emphasizing obedience, chastity, and humility as virtues to aspire to. You attend Mass, recite prayers, and participate in the sacraments, finding both comfort and constraint in the familiar rites. The local priest's sermons often remind you of your place, warning against pride and sin, and urging submission to the divine order. Yet, within the church's walls, you also find sanctuary, a place to grieve, to hope, and to connect with others who share your struggles. The nuns, cloistered yet powerful in their own right, offer education and refuge, teaching girls to read and write in a world that largely denies women such privileges. You encourage your granddaughter to learn, believing that knowledge is a fragile yet potent form of freedom, a seed that might one day grow into something more. You reflect on the paradox of your faith, how it both supports and limits you, offering solace, but also reinforcing the chains that bind. Historians still debate the extent to which religion empowered or oppressed medieval women, but your experience is a complex blend of reverence, skepticism, and quiet resilience. Outside your village, the world is in flux. Wars rage, kings rise and fall, plagues sweep through cities and countryside alike, and new ideas ripple through the fabric of society. News travels slowly, carried by wandering merchants and pilgrims whose tales are met with both hope and dread. You listen carefully, aware that these distant events will ripple through your life, bringing soldiers who take young men away, taxing your meager resources, and sometimes introducing new customs that unsettle the old order. Change is a double sword, bringing both opportunity and danger. You prepare your family to navigate these uncertainties, teaching adaptability, vigilance, and the importance of community. The younger generation grapples with these forces, some embracing new knowledge, and others clinging to tradition. You serve as a steady guide, sharing hard-earned wisdom and cautioning against blind trust. Your role as elder is both a burden and a privileger, living bridge between past and future, bearing the weight of memory and hope. Despite the hardships, moments of joy and connection punctuate your days. The laughter of children playing in the fields, the shared meal after a long day's work, the soft glow of candlelight during evening prayers, all these small treasures sustain you. You find solace in the rhythms of nature, the blooming of wildflowers, the return of migratory birds, the changing constellations that mark the passing seasons. These cycles offer continuity and hope amid the chaos of human affairs. Friendships forged over years provide comfort and understanding, a network of support among women who share the silent burdens of their gender. In these relationships, you find strength and freedom, the ability to be seen, to be heard, if only briefly and within trusted circles. As the years press heavier upon you, reflection deepens. You contemplate the legacy you will leave, a legacy not carved in stone or recorded in grand chronicles, but lived in the daily acts of care, survival, and quiet resistance. You understand that history often overlooks women like you, whose names remain unspoken and whose stories are woven into the fabric of community rather than emblazoned on monuments. Yet, your impact is profound, etched in the skills you have taught, the lives you have nurtured, and the resilience you embody. Your survival is an act of defiance, a testament to the power of women who live and love in the shadows of a harsh and unforgiving age. In this knowledge, you find peace, a soft light that warms your fading days and assures you that, though your story may be silent, it echoes in the hearts of those who come after. The morning light creeps quietly across your worn wooden floor, and as you slowly open your eyes, a familiar ache greets you, the residue of years spent bending, lifting, and enduring, each mark on your body a silent testament to a life forged in quiet hardship. Outside, the village rouses with soft murmurs and the gentle clatter of daily labor, the scent of damp earth mixing with the faint aroma of baking bread wafting through your window. You wrap yourself in your threadbare shawl, the fabric a comforting weight against your shoulders, and step outside into the cool air that promises both labor and continuity. Today, as with every day, you are the steady pulse in the rhythm of village life, a keeper of traditions, a guardian of stories, and a source of strength hidden beneath the folds of your simple dress. Your hands, though worn and scarred, still possess the deftness learned through decades of mending clothes, tending gardens, and soothing ailments, skills passed down like precious heirlooms from mother to daughter. You know the limits placed upon you by birth, the unyielding expectations of obedience and service. Yet within those confines, you have crafted a world where your voice, though soft, carries weight. Scholars often debate the degree of agency medieval women possessed, but your lived experience reveals a tapestry woven from threads of resilience, wisdom, and subtle resistance. The village depends on you in ways invisible to most. When illness spreads like a shadow, it is your knowledge of herbs and remedies that soothes fevers and staunches wounds. You recall the first time you were called upon to aid a mother in labor, your hands trembling but determined as you guided the birth with the ancient wisdom of your foremothers. The grim reality of childbirth in these times dance on the edge of life and death as a specter that haunts every woman's existence. Yet you carry this burden alongside the joy of new life, the miracle that births in the middle of hardship. You share remedies that blend superstition and science, the use of mugwort to ward off evil spirits, the strange ritual of carrying a bit of dried catnip to soothe restless nights, or the belief that tying a red ribbon round the wrist can protect a child from harm. These practices, dismissed by some but treasured by many, reflect the deep well of knowledge women cultivated to protect their families in a world often hostile to their survival. You pass these secrets on to the younger generation, knowing that in this passing lies power and survival, even if the outside world refuses to acknowledge it. Your thoughts drift to marriage, a pivotal moment that once defined your worth and shaped your destiny. The day you wed was marked not by love or choice, but by negotiation and exchange of alliances and property that relegated you to a role defined by obedience and production. The weight of your husband's expectations, the endless chores, the relentless pregnancy's ache, a reminder of your function in a system designed to control and contain you. You remember the bitter nights, the longing for freedom, and the rare moments of joy found in your children's laughter or a quiet conversation with another woman who understood the unspoken sorrows you bore. Marriage was often less a partnership and more a transaction, one where your consent was assumed, your desires secondary. Yet within this framework, you found ways to assert yourself, subtle acts of defiance, whispered prayers for strength, and the fierce protection of your family's welfare. These small rebellions, often invisible to the wider world, shaped your identity as both caretaker and survivor. The physical toll of childbirth and child-rearing was immense. Many women you knew did not survive their 5th or 6th birth, a grim reminder of the fragility of life. Historians still debate how marriage shaped women's autonomy in medieval society, but you know firsthand that it was both a cage and a crucible, forging resilience amid constraint. The Church's presence permeates your existence, a constant force that molds behavior, beliefs, and social order. Its teachings demand obedience, chastity, and humility, reinforcing the idea that a woman's highest virtue lies in submission. You attend Mass regularly, observing rituals that offer both solace and limitation, the weight of guilt and grace intertwined. The priest's sermons often admonish women to accept their roles without complaint, painting disobedience as a sin that disrupts divine harmony. Yet, within the sacred walls, you find moments of refuge, place to grieve lost children, to seek comfort in shared faith, and to connect with other women bound by similar struggles. The nuns, cloistered yet formidable, offer education to the few girls fortunate enough to learn to read and write, skills that shimmer like fragile hope in a dark world. You encourage your granddaughter to seize every opportunity, knowing that knowledge is a precarious form of freedom that can open doors or invite suspicion. The paradox of your faith, both oppressive and nurturing, is a constant companion, shaping your worldview and survival strategies. Scholars continue to debate whether religion empowered medieval women or further entrenched their subjugation. But your lived experience is a complex blend of reverence, endurance, and quiet rebellion. Beyond your village, the world churns with unrest and change wars that snatch young men from their homes, plagues that decimate populations, and shifting political landscapes that redraw boundaries and allegiances. News filters in sporadically, carried by wandering merchants and weary pilgrims. Each story a mixture of hope, fear, and uncertainty. You listen with a cautious heart, knowing these distant events will ripple through your life, altering the fabric of your community and family. The arrival of soldiers often means conscription or violence. New taxes strain your already meager resources, and rumors of reform bring both anticipation and anxiety. You prepare your family for these challenges with lessons in vigilance, adaptability, and mutual support. The younger generation wrestles with the tension between tradition and change, some embracing new ideas, others clinging to the familiar for comfort. Your role as elder is to guide them through this turbulent terrain, sharing hard-earned wisdom and fostering resilience. You are the steady anchor amid shifting tides, the keeper of memory and hope. Amidst the hardship, moments of joy and connection shine like rare jewels. The laughter of children running through fields, the shared bread at mealtime, the gentle glow of candlelight during evening prayers nourish your weary spirit. You find solace in the natural world, the blooming of wildflowers, the song of birds returning with spring, the steady cycle of seasons that promise renewal even when human lives falter. Friendships formed over years offer deep comfort, a network of understanding and shared strength among women who bear silent burdens together. In these relationships, you glimpse freedom, the ability to be seen and heard in ways the wider world rarely permits. These bonds sustain you, reminding you that even in a time and place of harsh limits, community offers a sanctuary for the heart. As age deepens its hold, your thoughts turn to legacy, not the grand monuments of kings and nobles, but the subtle imprints left in daily acts of love, care, and endurance. You know history may forget your name, but the lessons you impart, the lives you touch, and the strength you embody will ripple through generations. Your survival is itself a testament, a quiet rebellion against a world that sought to diminish. You, the scars you carry, visible and hidden, tell a story of resilience and grace that defies erasure. In your fading days, you find peace in this knowledge, a soft light that warms the twilight of your life and assures you that though your story may be silent, it echoes in the hearts and hands of those who come after. The faint light of dawn barely brushes your eyelids open, yet your body already stirs from decades of conditioned ritual, kneading dough, fetching water, tending to fires that burn low but must never die out. Outside, the village awakens slowly, the steady murmur of life stirring the morning air. Children's laughter muffled by distance, the lowing of cattle stirred by farmers' calls, and the rustle of the wind threading through skeletal trees still bare from the harsh winters. Grasp. Your hands, now gnarled and rough from years of ceaseless labor, move with an economy of motion born of practice and necessity, wrapping a worn shawl tighter against the chill that settles deep in your bones. You are once again the invisible thread holding the tapestry of this medieval world together and seen, unheralded, yet utterly indispensable. In a society where women's voices are muffled beneath layers of expectation and law, your survival depends on mastering the art of endurance, quiet strength, and subtle influence, because overt power is a luxury few women of your station can afford. Historians still argue how much freedom women truly had in the Middle Ages, but your life reveals a truth far more complex, a constant negotiation between constraint and agency, invisibility and indispensability. Your thoughts wander as you prepare the meager breakfast coarse bread, thin broth, and the occasional herb-infused tea that will sustain you through another day. You reflect on the complex relationship between women and medicine in this time. Official healers are often men, educated in Latin and steeped in the doctrine of Galen. But their knowledge is limited by social class and gender restrictions. Meanwhile, women like you serve as the village's unofficial doctors, midwives, and herbalists, wielding a body of knowledge passed down through centuries and encoded in the natural world around you. The wisdom you carry how to brew a poultice from yarrow to stop bleeding, which roots to crush for stomach aches, or how to soothe a fever with willow bark has saved countless lives, including your own. You smile, remembering the quirks of this folk medicine, the superstition that a frog placed under the bed could absorb evil dreams, or that carrying a piece of amber could ward off the plague. These beliefs may seem quaint to modern ears, but in a world where science is and perilous, they offer comfort and a sense of control amid chaos. You pass this knowledge carefully, aware that such power invites suspicion. Women who heal too well risk accusations of witchcraft, a terrifying spectre that has claimed many before you. Scholars debate the extent to which medieval women wielded real medical authority versus being marginalized, but you know your role is a delicate balance, both vital and precarious. Marriage has long since passed from choice to obligation in your life, yet the memories linger like a ghost. You recall the day your hand was given to a man you barely knew, the ceremony, a formal exchange witnessed by families and clergy, binding you to a life of servitude and reproduction. Marriage in your world is less a partnership of equals and more a transaction securing alliances and property, where your consent is presumed and your voice muted. The endless pregnancies that followed marked the passing years, each one a gamble between joy and tragedy, with many women never surviving. The ordeal: you bore children not only as gifts, but as insurance, tokens of your worth measured in heirs. The physical toll was brutal aches that never fully fade, exhaustion that seeps into the marrow, and the ever-present fear of losing a child. A fate that visited too many in your village. Yet, amidst this harshness, you found moments of tenderness. A newborn's breath against your skin, the quiet bond of nursing, and the fleeting smiles of a child's laughter. These instances of love sustain you, fragile beacons in a life marked by sacrifice. Marriage, historians argue, both confined and defined women, but within its constraints, you learned to navigate, to protect, and to assert subtle forms of agency that ensured your family's survival. The church, a towering presence in every aspect of life, offers both sanctuary and suppression. You attend Mass each Sunday, dressed in your simplest clothes, the flicker of candlelight casting dancing shadows over the frescoes of saints whose stories echo sacrifice and purity. The priest's voice booms with sermons emphasizing obedience and humility, preaching that women's highest calling is submission to God, husband, and society. The religious calendar shapes your year, fasting days, feast days, holy observances that demand adherence and reinforce your place in a divinely ordained hierarchy. Yet within these sacred walls, you find moments of community and comfort. The church is a rare space where women gather, share grief, and find solace in ritual. The convents offer a different kind of refuge, cloistered yet powerful. The nuns teach reading and writing, skills rare and precious among women. You encourage your granddaughter to absorb these lessons, knowing education is a fragile spark that could illuminate a path beyond the kitchen and hearth. The paradox of religions, role both confining and empowering, colors your faith with shades of hope and frustration. Scholars still debate whether the church was a vehicle for women's oppression or a complex institution offering limited avenues for influence, but for you, it is both sanctuary and cage, shaping your identity and survival outside the familiar fields and thatched roofs. The world beyond the village is in turmoil. Rumors of wars between lords, plagues devastating towns, and the shifting allegiances of kings arrive like distant thunder, unsettling the fragile peace. News travels slowly and often distorted, yet the impact is immediate. Soldiers conscript young men, leaving fields untended and families bereft. Taxes rise, draining the already thin reserves, and new laws alter the social fabric in ways both subtle and profound. You teach your family to navigate these storms with caution and resilience, emphasizing the need to adapt and protect. The younger generation faces this upheaval with a mix of fear and defiance. Some cling to old customs for security, while others dare to dream of change. Your role as elder is to steady their course, sharing hard-won wisdom and nurturing the hope that survival means more than mere existence. You understand that the ripples of distant events will shape the lives of your grandchildren, and you prepare them for a world that demands both strength and flexibility. Despite the heavy burdens, moments of lightness and connection punctuate your days like rare flowers blooming in harsh soil. The laughter of children running through fields, the shared warmth of a communal meal, and the soft glow of candlelight during evening prayers offer fleeting respite. You find comfort in the cycles of nature, the first shoots of spring, the steady flight of birds, the changing constellations marking time and eternity. These rhythms remind you that life persists despite hardship, and in this persistence lies hope. Friendships forged over years become lifelines, offering shared understanding and unspoken support among women bound by experience. These connections, though quiet and often overlooked, are acts of resistance and survival, providing strength and a measure of freedom in a world that limits women's voices as your years advance and the fire in your bones dims. You reflect on the legacy you leave behind, not inscribed in stone or recorded in grand histories, but alive in the lives you have touched, the knowledge you have passed down, and the resilience you embody. Your story, like those of countless medieval women, may remain silent in the annals of history, but it resonates deeply in the fabric of your community and in the hearts of those who follow. You take solace in the knowledge that through endurance and love, you have carved a place for yourself and those who will come after. a quiet but unbreakable testament to the strength of women living in a time when their worth was too often denied. As twilight gathers around your fading days, a gentle peace settles over you, the soft light of your legacy glowing warmly in the shadows. The first pale hues of dawn barely touch your weathered face as you awaken to the familiar creak of your old wooden bed frame and the faint rustling of straw beneath you, a reminder of the humble beginnings that have shaped every moment of your life. Outside your small cottage, the village stirs, a rooster's distant crow, the soft clinking of a bucket against the well, children's hushed whispers as they prepare for the day ahead. You rise slowly, muscles stiff from years of labor and the relentless passage of time, wrapping your threadbare shawl tightly around your shoulders to ward off the morning chill that creeps in through the gaps in your door. Today, like every day, you prepare to face the unyielding realities of medieval womanhood, a world where your value is weighed in childbirth, obedience, and the endless chores that chain you to hearth and home. The social order, rigid and unbending, has dictated your life from birth. A daughter meant to marry well, a wife to bear heirs, a mother to nurture the next generation, and a servant to the needs of others. Yet, beneath this harsh exterior lies a deep well of resilience, knowledge, and subtle power, qualities that historians still debate when trying to unravel the true extent of women's agency during these turbulent times. You begin your morning tasks with a practiced rhythm, lighting the hearth fire to chase away the cold, grinding grain to make coarse bread, and tending the small herb garden behind your homer patch of green life that offers both sustenance and remedies in a world often cruel and unforgiving. This garden is your sanctuary, a place where the old wisdom passed down from mother to daughter thrives alongside fragile hopes. You recall the herbal lore that has been your secret weapon against illness, the soothing properties of chamomile for restless children, the fever-reducing qualities of elderflower, and the mysterious power of nettle infusions to strengthen the blood. Some remedies, like carrying a piece of jetstone or tying a bit of red wool around the wrist, border on superstition but provide comfort when all else fails. You share these tales with the young girls who seek your counsel, teaching them not just about plants and potions, but about survival in a society that often dismisses their worth. The line between folk medicine and feared witchcraft is thin, and you navigate it carefully, knowing that your skills can save lives but also attract suspicion. The scholarly debate over the role of women healers in medieval society continues to this day, but your lived experience reveals a complex dance between empowerment and danger. Marriage, a cornerstone of your existence, looms large in your memory. You remember the day your family arranged your union, not for love, but for alliances and economic advantage. The ceremony, conducted in Latin that you barely understood, sealed your fate, a life defined by service to your husband, producing heirs, and managing a household that demanded constant attention. The endless pregnancies left their mark on your body and spirit, each child a blessing and a risk. As the dangers of childbirth claimed many women in your village, you recall the sleepless nights, the ache in your limbs, and the ever-present fear that you might not survive to see your children grow. Yet, amidst these hardships, there were moments of tenderness, the softness of a newborn's breath, the shared laughter with other women during brief reprieves, and the fierce love that bound you to your family. Marriage, while confining, was also a space where you learned to assert quiet forms of influence, managing the household's resources, mediating disputes, and nurturing alliances. This duality, both prison and platformers, a paradox scholars still wrestle with when examining Medieval women's lives. Religion is woven deeply into the fabric of your daily existence, a source of both comfort and constraint. The Church dictates moral codes, social roles, and even personal worth, emphasizing obedience, chastity, and piety as the highest virtues for women. You attend Mass regularly, joining the congregation in prayers and hymns, finding solace in rituals that connect you to something greater, while also reinforcing the strictures placed upon your gender. The sermons, often stern and unyielding, remind you of your place beneath men and God alike. Yet the churchyard also serves as a gathering place, where women share grief, hope, and quiet rebellion. The convents, cloistered worlds of their own, offer a rare refuge for those seeking education or an alternative to marriage, and you encourage your granddaughter to absorb whatever knowledge she can, understanding that literacy and learning are keys to a different kind of power. The relationship between medieval women and the Church remains a subject of intense scholarly debate. Was it a source of oppression, or did it provide unexpected avenues for agency? Your experience, steeped in faith and frustration, embodies this tension. Beyond the village boundaries, the wider world unfolds in chaotic waves. Wars rage between kingdoms. Devastating plagues sweep through cities and countryside alike, and rulers rise and fall with alarming frequency. News arrives slowly, carried on the backs of traveling merchants or whispered by passing travelers, each tale coloring your perception of the precariousness of life. Soldiers conscript young men, leaving fields untended and families vulnerable. Taxes increase, further squeezing your meager resources, and shifting political alliances disrupt the fragile balance of daily existence. You prepare your family to face these upheavals with resilience and adaptability, teaching vigilance and the importance of community. The younger generation faces these challenges with a mix of fear and hope. Some cling to tradition, others dare to dream of change. Your role as elder is to guide them through uncertainty, sharing hard-earned wisdom and fostering a spirit of endurance. Amid the relentless demands and dangers, moments of joy and connection punctuate your days like stars breaking through a cloudy sky. The laughter of children playing in fields, the shared warmth of a simple meal, and the soft flicker of candlelight during evening prayers offer brief but precious relief. You find comfort in the rhythms of nature, the blossoming of spring flowers, the steady migration of birds, the endless turning of the seasons, which remind you of life's persistence despite human suffering. Friendships formed over decades provide a vital network of support, especially among women who share the silent burdens of their sex. These bonds, though quiet and often overlooked, are acts of resistance and survival, creating a space where you can be seen and heard beyond the expectations imposed upon you. As the weight of years settles more heavily on your shoulders, you contemplate the legacy you will leave, not recorded in grand tomes or inscribed on monuments, but alive in the lives you have nurtured, the knowledge you have shared, and the resilience you have embodied. Your story, like that of countless medieval women, may remain unspoken in history's grand narratives, but it resonates deeply in the fabric of your community and in the hearts of those who follow. You find solace in the understanding that through endurance, love, and quiet strength, you have carved a space for yourself and future generations, testament to the power and perseverance of women whose lives, though often hidden, shaped the course of human history. As evening descends and the hearth's glow flickers softly, a gentle peace settles over you, a warm light glowing in the shadows, promising that your silent legacy will live on. The dim glow of twilight seeps through the cracks in your cottage walls, casting long shadows that flicker and dance like ghosts of the countless days and nights you have endured in this relentless medieval world. A world that has both shaped and confined you since your first breath. You settle into your worn chair, the fabric threadbare and softened by years of use, feeling the familiar ache of bones weary from a lifetime of labor and sacrifice. Outside, the village quiets animals nestle into their stalls. The last of the children's laughter fades, and a gentle wind rustles through the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and woods. This is your moment of reflection, the pause at the end of a long day and a long life, where the endless demands of your existence slip away and what remains is the quiet beating heart of your story. The legacy of a woman who lived in a time when simply surviving was an act of courage. Your hands, gnarled but steady, rest in your lap, the lines etched deep as maps of your journey, each scar, each callus. A chapter in a narrative too often silenced by history, but alive and vivid. In your memory, historians still argue whether medieval women were powerless victims or subtle agents of change. But your life is proof of the complex truth of endurance and resistance woven into every breath, every whispered prayer, and every act of love and survival. As you close your eyes, the memories flood in, vivid and unbidden, the sharp chill of winter mornings, when you rose before dawn to stoke the fire and prepare the day's meager meals, the constant hum of the spinning wheel turning thread into fabric, a task both tedious and vital, binding you to the rhythms of home and hearth, the joyful chaos of children chasing each other in the fields, their laughter a fragile defiance against the ever-present hardships. You remember the sacred moments spent with your mother and grandmothers, their voices a soothing cadence of folk tales, herbal wisdom, and cautions about the world's dangers. Lessons you have passed down through generations like precious heirlooms. The church bells tolling on Sunday mornings, calling you to the austere beauty of the chapel, where faith and fear mingled in sermons that both comforted and confined, reminding you of your place in a divine order that demanded obedience and humility. And you recall the quiet rebellions, secret prayers whispered in the dark, stolen moments with friends where laughter and shared sorrows wove a tapestry of solidarity, the subtle assertion of your worth in a world eager to diminish it. The physical toll of your life weighs heavily on your body, a testament to the brutal realities faced by medieval women. Childbirth, a mixture of hope and terror, left scars deeper than those visible on skin. Some women never lived to cradle their children, and the fear of death during delivery hung over every pregnancy like a dark cloud. You bore this burden alongside countless others, your strength tested time and again as you nurtured life in a world that often seemed bent on extinguishing it. Yet, within this crucible of suffering, you found purpose and pride, a fierce love that transcended pain and hardship. The endless chores, cooking, cleaning, tending animals, weaving, gardening were not mere tasks, but lifelines that kept your family and community alive. And you performed them with a diligence born of necessity and devotion. Though the laws and customs sought to bind you, your spirit remained unbroken, finding freedom in the spaces between obligation and desire. Your relationship with the church was as complex as your own soul, a blend of reverence, frustration, and survival. The clergy's teachings shaped your moral framework, often reinforcing the subjugation of women through sermons that praised chastity and obedience, while condemning pride and disobedience as sins. Yet, the church also provided a framework for community and hope, a place to mourn, to celebrate, to seek solace in shared faith. You witnessed the power of the nuns, women who carved out roles of influence within cloistered walls, preserving knowledge and offering education to a select few. You dreamt that your granddaughter might one day walk a path less burdened by ignorance and limitation, holding in her hands the fragile power of literacy and learning. The paradox of faith, both cage and sanctuary, defined much of your existence. A theme that scholars continue to debate when considering the role of religion in medieval women's lives. Beyond your village, the tides of history swirled with violence and change. Wars that tore families apart, plagues that decimated populations, and shifting alliances that redrew the map of kingdoms and fiefdoms. You learned to navigate these storms with vigilance and resilience, teaching your children the importance of adaptability and the strength found in community. You understood that the future was uncertain, shaped by forces beyond your control. Yet you held fast to the hope that through endurance and love, your lineage would survive and perhaps even thrive. The younger generation, with their tentative dreams and fierce wills, looked to you for guidance, and you bore that responsibility with a quiet dignity, even amid hardship. Moments of joy and connection shone brightly, simple pleasures like the warmth of a shared meal, the softness of a child's touch, the beauty of a sunset painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Nature's cycles offered reassurance, the blooming of flowers, the steady migration of birds, the turning of seasons, reminding you that life continues, fragile yet persistent. Friendships formed over years were lifelines, offering understanding and strength in a world that often silenced women's voices. These relationships, though subtle, were acts of rebellion and survival, creating spaces where you could be seen and heard as night deepens. Your thoughts slow and soften, the sharp edges of your day's labor fading into a gentle haze. You feel the weight of years lift slightly, replaced by a warm, abiding peace. You know your story, though unrecorded by scribes and absent from grand histories, is etched in the lives you have touched and the resilience you embody. Your legacy is one of quiet strength, love, and endurance, a beacon for those who come after, whispering that even in the darkest of times, a woman's spirit can shine with unwavering light. Now, as your breathing slows and the world slips into dreams, you rest with the knowledge that your life, complex, difficult, and beautiful, is a vital thread in the vast tapestry of history.